just so relaxing to listen to. So nice. So I'm told I have to stand in the middle. Hello, middle. Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Southworth. I think I know some of you, but not everybody, so I hope I get to meet you at some point. I'm dean here at the Concord Community Music School, and it's a pleasure to have Maurizio with us today. I hope you all have on your calendars the concert for next week, and with Maurizio and Noah Harrington and Sophia, violinist. That's not her last name. Chiaradini. Hey, I got it. I've been working on these names. Maurizio is a colleague of some of our wonderful faculty. We seem to have more and more faculty from Berkeley, it's a great connection. We've had many faculty members over the years, and it's just a wonderful connection. It's not too far away. And I'm really excited to learn about this genre, this mixing of Latin American folkloric musical ideas. And I think most of you know the logistics of this place, but restrooms are right at the bottom of the stairs where most of you came in. And there is a green bowl, which should be in the back of the hall, back there? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yes, and if you'd like to make a donation to the music school to keep these kind of programs going, that would be lovely. I think that's all of the basic announcements. I went through them faster than I thought, which means I probably forgot something. Oh, yes, I wanted to say the Walker Lecture Fund sponsors these events. So if you ever have a few minutes and you want to thank them for doing that, it's a wonderful service to the community, and it gives a chance for our colleagues and faculty to share their musical gifts and their expertise in what they do. If you did not see the article in the Concord Monitor yesterday, it has a wonderful detailed description and biography of each musician who will be performing next week as well. So without further ado, let's go back to this wonderful music. Welcome, Maurizio.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. It's very exciting to be here. I've never been up here before, especially for something with my name on it. So this is really wonderful. And I was like, let's just see what's gonna happen. You know, I like to improvise. Unfortunately, I'm a jazz musician. Some people don't. When I do folk music. I like to think that that's what I do, Latin American folk music. But I actually did not grow up being a folk musician. My parents raised me in the wonderful music of 80s pop music, so I know all the hits. And then, I was a rebellious kind of teen, and I went into rock and roll and all the music that my dad turned on the radio when it came up. And then I started studying with a teacher that taught me that no, the real music is jazz music. That's the real music. And those are the people that really know what's going on. So I immersed myself in that world, and I don't know why. It's like, long story short, I don't know why. I think there was something about the way he taught me jazz, or the way that I understood the music to be, that is what folk music resonated to me about. There was just something about the authenticity of the music, the sort of the no thinking nature of it, the nature of just like once you just see it and it's there, it's always there for you. It's up for grabs. It's free. It's always yours. The great thing about folkloric music is that it doesn't really belong to anyone. I mean, obviously it comes from a place, and you can't just be like, oh, nothing comes from nowhere. No, it comes from a place, but once you grab it, it's always yours. It's always a part of who you are. But for that reason, I think, being a student of folk music and researching it and trying to understand it as an outsider, I realized that sometimes it's really hard for people to connect to it, or it's really hard to explain it, or it's really hard to make it seem like it's just not this super foreign thing, that how am I ever going to connect to that when my life doesn't sound like that, and I don't see the world like that. And so what I'm going to try to do here is sort of, first of all, be like, I'm one of you. I'm not necessarily born in the folkloric tradition, and I look at it from the outside. And I found some things in certain things about Latin American music specifically that I think that, there's sort of, it's almost like when you, I don't know if anyone relates to not being very good at math, and it's like they give you a couple tricks, and then you can just kind of survive through things. Music is like that. Music is sometimes just a magical thing too, but sometimes music is very sort of, there's just little tidbits and little sciencey things. It's like when you know a little bit of science, you can wow people at a dinner party or something. So with music, it's kind of the same thing. There are elements, there are things that if you kind of know how to grab for them, know how to listen to them, when you tell someone about them, they think you're a genius, and they offer you a lecture in Concord and stuff like that. Not related at all to what's happening here. So, I'm really happy that there's all sorts of people here. If anyone ever has a question, didn't understand what I was saying, totally raise the hand. We'll take it as it comes. I'm down to just flow with this as it comes. But a rough story about Latin America, let's take it back. Sometime in the year sort of 1400 something, some people got on some ships, traveled through the sea, and ended in this place that they had never seen before. They were like, what is this? And eventually that's how, America started to happen. America was the new world. And there's a very famous writer from where I come from, which is Venezuela, by the way. And he used to say that, it's the new world is not new because we discovered it. It's new because new things happened in it that had not happened quite in the same way before. Because what happened in America? The Europeans came over on their ships, and it wasn't just a wasteland. There were people living there with culture, with traditions, with music, with anything. And then, Europeans didn't like a lot of the things that were hanging out, and it used to be this thing. Back in the day, humans used to be a lot more free about, go away, and now this is mine, and all sorts of things. And so what happened is that then the European and the American indigenous starts to combine. And then what happened also? There was a need of the Europeans to get some stuff done, get certain things done, built, made, produced, so and so. So they decided, hey, there's this whole continent of people hanging out, I think it's called Africa or something. Why don't we grab some of those people and we just kind of bring them over to America to do our bidding? Of course, this is a very, sort of casual way of speaking about very, hard history, but, it's not a history thing, so we're not gonna go there. But what ended up happening is that then you have a group, an already complex group of ethnicities, which is the European world, because there's several different kinds of cultural and ethnic groups hanging out there all by itself, that now get mixed with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of American indigenous groups, that now you also add into the pot the immense array of ethnic groups, cultural groups, traditions, music, ways of living of the African continent. And these three elements come together in what we call America. Latin America, North America, South America, etc. This had never happened before in the history of the world. Three such distinct groups like these ones that were so vast and that were kind of getting mixed randomly. Like the mixture that you see in one part of Venezuela is different from another part of Venezuela, and let alone different from another country in Latin America, such as Colombia, or Argentina, or Uruguay, or Chile, or Brazil, etc., etc. So, in a nutshell, you don't really need, that's a good enough reason already why, when I tell you about Latin American music, I can pull up an encyclopedia of musical genres and musical sort of demonstrations that arose naturally from the sort of similar batch of elements, but they're all infinitely different because they come from different mixtures of African elements, different mixtures of European elements, and different mixtures of indigenous elements. So I just kind of want to put it out there because I'm going to try to speak about a lot of things, but I've been researching this music for years, and every day someone sends me something. And it's like, did you know about this? And I was like, what the hell is that? And it's like, oh, this is a folk music from another part of Argentina that you didn't know existed. From an indigenous group that you didn't know was there, that got mixed with another thing. And oh, that violin they're playing, actually there's an instrument in Gambia that looks very similar. And so it's like, wow. So you're talking about, you know, just as a thought experiment, imagine, you know, a musical instrument or a musical style coming from a place such as Gambia, which is a little country in Africa, that then gets mixed with indigenous cultures in, let's say, the north of Venezuela, that then gets mixed with musical elements such as the major scale that comes from Europe, and that sings to a saint that, you know, probably used to be called something different back in the day, but now there's a whole Jesus Christ thing going on. So then, you know, they're kind of stuck in the middle. So then they talk about Jesus Christ, but they're actually talking about the other God, and they're playing with instruments that they also made in this new country called Venezuela. And you know, it'd be very easy to call that Venezuelan music. But look at all the elements that we have gone through in the last 5 minutes that have nothing to do with Venezuela. This is before Venezuela was a country. So that is sort of the history of what Latin American folkloric music is. It's always different everywhere, but I think there are certain elements that we can distinguish and be like, this is what you should listen to when you listen to music. And the main one is a thing, you know, we like to use terms in music that don't mean anything, but for us mean a lot of things, and we sound smart when we say them. There is such a thing called a polyrhythm. Has anyone here heard that word? Sounds cool. Yeah, cool. So poly means many, I think in Greek. Is that it? Yeah, I see nods. Cool. Yeah. I don't remember. And then rhythm is obviously, you know, an element of music, which is the organization of events in time. So many forms of organizing events in time. Polyrhythm, many rhythms. Now, I tend to think that there's two main ways of organizing rhythm, that we organize rhythm as humans, in the sort of at the root level, you know, because everything can get more complicated. But at the root level, there are binary things and there are ternary things. Now, what do I mean by that? It's very easy for us, it's actually natural for us to understand things that are binary in rhythm. What do I mean by that? Well, if you have the fortune of, you know, walking on 2 feet, that's binary. There's left and right, and left and right. And general directions are up and down. You understand what it means to go from here to there. You never really go from here to there to somewhere else to then here again. We have a sense of what this is, which is just 1 and 2, or 0 and 1. It's something and something else, and it goes back, and it cycles in one direction. That's a binary thing. This is binary too. Like, I didn't tell you that was a rhythm, I didn't tell you that was, you know, a time signature or anything to do with music theory. No, it's a sense of this and the other thing that's in the middle. Even if it was just that. What's in the middle of this and the other this? To not call it anything. What's in the middle? Nothing. Well, space, nothing, silence. All these words are valid, but there's something. No one is lost. No one is lost. No one is like none of these are catching you by surprise, you know? Like, oh my God, there it is again. What is that, you know? Like when you hear a noise and you don't know what it is. You know, have you ever noticed that if there's a leak or if there's a noise in your house, in the office, somewhere, When you don't know what it is, it kind of freaks you out. You're like, what the hell is this? And it keeps coming, and you're like, what is it? But once you're aware of what it is, and if it happens at a regular enough time, you kind of get used to it. You can get used to anything, because humans our brains have a way of understanding consequent events, as long as they repeat semi-frequently. And even if they don't, we understand them anyway, because we understand politics, and that's not frequent at all. But silence, space, there's momentum, there's gravity. I like to say gravity, but then scientists are like, no, gravity's something else. But I love gravity because there's just that sense of we all feel this kind of thing. And that's binary, meaning that there's something and there's something else. So there's two elements. But I do feel that as humans, we have the ability to feel ternary elements too, which means that there is a sense of a third element in time, let's say. Meaning that we can feel something like, we can go like now I'm just making noises, but there's something else there too. Now there's like two noises, but there's a third one also kind of there. The other two are in context. To me, it stops there because, once you get into groups of four is just twos and twos. And sixes are threes and threes. But 2 and 3 are kind of their own thing. So meaning that when you look at root musical elements in folk music, you have elements of twos and elements of threes. Meaning a sense of understanding this and something else, and then this, and a little thing, and then we're back at it. Which could be understood in something like, for example, here's a binary element that you might have heard before. They used to call it Habanera. There's a very famous piece of music called Habanera. They say the Habanera comes from Cuba, from La Habana, and it's a very old sort of rhythmic cell that it's very hard to find nowadays, especially even in old music. Like the oldest music I can sort of find on the internet is from the 20s, let's say, and it's really hard to find this kind of rhythmic cell in music from the 20s, but it is, and it's this kind of. Now, when you hear that, you kind of hear these two, you just kind of hear this movement from boom, boom, boom. So the main movement that's happening is just a movement of here, and here's the other thing, and here's the other thing, and here's the other thing. But it's always from one side to the other. That's a binary feeling. If I take the same thing, and I go more like, how come you don't mistake, how come you always can hear that low note, that sort of grounding element? How can you always hear it in the same place? I'm playing something very similar. I'm even playing accents and loud noises in the same places, but you can feel that there's a different gravity to it. I see some nods, so that means it's good. Because that means that, so there is a difference between a binary feeling and a tertiary, a feeling of 2 and a feeling of 3 is very clear. It's very easy to understand. There's a lot of folkloric music that just handles with just these two elements. I did bring some music here that I can play for y'all. You know, there's a wonderful music from Argentina that some of you might know of, which is called tango. Tango, yeah, tango is cool. You know, tango's been around for a really long time. Tango was invented somewhere at the end of the 1800s. So it's been all over the place in terms of how they play it nowadays versus how they played it in the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s. But it's really interesting when you hear really old tango. For example, this is 32, but I think this is from before. I think this is from either late 20s or maybe right 1930. You can kind of hear, you know, we tend to associate tango with a feeling of more like, you know, like there's this kind of ching, 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 ching. It's like, so that's not even binary, that's just like one. It's just like right there, you're right there with it. But when you hear really old orchestras, there's almost a sense of this bigger swing that they got from one side to the next. I found this really cool recording, I wanted to play it for you all. And let me know when it's loud enough. Yeah, you go. It's not. Which you might hear nowadays, especially when you check out our Tang orchestra, you know, they might be like that famous. What's that famous thing? It's a lot more. It's sort of like ting, ting. But when you listen to the like, that's the feeling, the overall feeling of this sort of two-ness, this and that, and there were a lot of old genres of music that used to be played with this very sort of heavy feeling of ones and twos. When you listen to old boleros, the same thing happens. And when you listen, and even really old Brazilian music, before, you know, because there's samba, obviously, and we know bossa nova, and all the wonderful things that have happened after the 50s and 60s. But when you listen to really old Brazilian music, and composers that used to write on the piano a lot, and they came from more of that European school of mazurkas and polkas and things, their swing was also different. It was more like, instead of being this kind of, like we all know that song, but you know, everyone knows the friggin', like, you know, I'm not going to try to sing it, my Portuguese is horrible. There's the stableness, but all the stuff that I'm doing in the middle of like ding, ding, gig, 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 gig. When you listen to like really old Brazilian music, used to be played a lot more like So there's this. What's the difference between that and this?
That element that's sort of a pause, but it's actually a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the second beat in the older music, and it's more on the third or later number. So that's part of it makes it, because there's a note and then a silence and then more notes versus notes.
Yeah, that's a very.
In both of those examples, the tango and that one had that same, which kind of gives it that swing.
It kind of gives it that swing. That's a very detailed answer. I was not ready for that. That was a curveball. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, but there are sort of subtle differences, stylistic differences between one thing and the other thing. But I kind of hear them coming from the same place. They're kind of just coming from that same place of bam, 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 bam. Like if we're gonna do the whole thing, the whole step. There's the clock thing, there's the clockwork, and then there's just the stuff in between. But the stuff in between is not super relevant. It's just kind of. It's almost like crutches. It's almost like just getting you to the place. But it could just be like. Like, what's the little guy? The little guy is just kind of there. And it helps, it's almost like, and here, and now, and here, we are, and here. Like, it feels a lot kind of sequential. There's a consequence to that feeling. There's something leading you to the place. Versus if you're just like, yes, now, go, yes. It's almost like, and one, and two. And three. We kind of like this. As humans, we like this feeling of and one, and two, and three. We like this hiccup, this kind of leading thing that just takes us to where we know we're gonna be, and we know we're there, and it's very stable. We kind of like having this kind of crutchy feeling to things. So it's very important, but it's not super vital. The vital part is the clockwork. I see some people already kind of getting it. I didn't even have to say the clock thing. But there's a reason why it is the way it is. That's the way it is. We just have this understanding of like, yeah, I'm here and I'm there and I can just live here forever. And that's totally fine. Now what happens? I'm gonna do the same thing, the same kind of thing. Yeah? So we have this, right? The 1-2 thing, the binary thing. If I do the opposite, I'm going to take out the binary thing. Well, what the hell is this? Well, I know that the other thing is here, right? Okay. So it's two things, but they're not happening with the other thing. But they're also stable. Huh. But they can't be binary because the other thing is binary. You can't have binary on binary. Or can you? Well, what if I make it easier? What if I go, oh, hang on. So that's what's happening. This is just kind of bouncing off, the other two. Oh no, that doesn't sound as good. What was I doing before? There it is. Oh. I don't know. This is how I think about things. Did anyone have the same aha moment that I had some time ago? So I don't remember when. It was like, oh, okay. Like this by itself doesn't make a lot of sense. Except when you put that. Now this makes sense. But what is it? I don't really know. Because Because we're not using music theory. Because music theory is not necessary for anything. It's barely. Okay. Sometimes it is. I'm trying to, what is this thing? What is it? Oh, it's like when I put it with the other thing, only a little of it, now it makes perfect sense. There's a gravity to it too. Did you feel it? Do you feel how different it feels when I go? All of a sudden now there's gravity to this. But it's a different thing altogether from what we were doing before. Before we were doing the simple, like, we're here, and we're here, and we're here. Now there's like 3 things going on. But they still have gravity. And they still feel like they belong together. So what is it? Why does it work? It is the beat. It's the beat. But what? But then how come we have a beat? Because before we had a beat because we were hearing it, right? You know, this is a beat. No one's gonna be like, oh, the beat is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it's like, it's right there. But now. You know, how come this is not the beat? Like, this could be the beat, right? That could be the beat. Ish. Doesn't feel as great, right? Doesn't feel awesome. You know? We can make it super even. So is this the beat? I mean, it could be. Ah, but that feels so much better, doesn't it? So what is it? How come we can see it? We can understand that it makes sense. There's a sequence of 3 going on. We understand that perfectly. Not one of them is like a surprise, like, you know, knockout blow. But they feel so much better when there's a sort of larger beat or larger gravity going on. And that gravity doesn't feel like it's part of a 3 thing, right? You're not counting each time I do this like 3 times. No, that's not the beginning. The beginning is like... We're back to the binary thing. We're still in 2, but I thought we were in 3. So what the hell? Are we in 3 or are we in 2? Remember that word? Polyrhythm? Many rhythms? Many ways of seeing events in time? That's where we are. The root of what, you know, is so much music in Latin America that comes from music in Europe, which is in 3. 3 only works in relationship to 2, because 2 comes before 3, in music at least. You know, I'm not going to talk to a mathematician about this, but they got their own thing going on. This feeling, we understand as human beings the sequence of elements of 3, but it only makes sense when there's a binary thing going on underneath it. Yeah? It's cool, right? Yes.
Do you think that, for me, it has to do with the heartbeat?
There you go. It could be. It could be anything.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Oh, no, yeah. There's a very famous musician called Victor Wooten.
Yes.
He kind of changed my life when I was a lot younger. Oh, God. No, okay. But, you know, he said something, you know, rhythm is not, you know, rhythm is beyond, like, rhythm is a musical element, but not really. Rhythm is life. Life has rhythm. Music is a manifestation of life, it's a manifestation of reality, and so is rhythm. We use rhythm in music, but it's not beholden to music. And that's why we can be like, oh yeah, this is in 3. And we're going to play this music in 3. And it's totally in 3. But there's this annoying... there's this annoying thing just kind of pulling us that would feel so good, but has nothing to do with the three. So what gives? Oh, it's because gravity and rhythm are not about music. They come from how we experience the world. But we're getting to the good stuff. So now we have, all right, we understand this two thing going on, right? We understand this three thing going on, but this three thing only really feels good when the two thing is going on at the same time. So they're both crossing each other at the same time. But we can tell them apart. What if we couldn't tell them apart? What if they were one and the same? Well, as the new world of America takes place, it just so happens that indigenous people, African people, they looked at the European thing and they were like, yeah, we could do that. We can do them at the same time. And it's gonna sound great. And the Europeans were like, what do you mean? And it's like, well, I can take your two and take your so we hear the three and we hear the two. We can go. Is it in three or is it in two? And I'm not even making it funky. I'm just spelling it out. Oh, what so? Hang on. You see it? We were there all along. We just didn't realize it. We were playing three things at the same time that we were playing two things. We were just seeing them as different things. It's like, oh no, and this feels like that, and this feels like that. And it was slower, and it was a different way of understanding the world. But there's something, different human beings, different ethnic groups, different cultures, they see things differently. And they were like, no, we're right here, right? I mean, there's three things going on in my thumb, and there's two things going on in my fingers. If I just do it fast, then. And we're right there. And then it's like, now we get to have fun, so now it's I'm just playing around, but the only thing that's going on is that now, we went from and now we hear. This is the famous 3 against 2 polyrhythm that music people will make. We will confuse a lot of people by talking about it in that way. It's a 3 against 2 polyrhythm that is so deep in the musical complexity of the polyrhythmic nature of the development of the ethos and whatever. And it's like, it's so complicated. No, it's the natural evolution of the musical elements that came from Europe, settled in America, and were digested by the Native Americans, the indigenous people, and then the African influence too. And that is the main element of so much music from South America that you can look at. I mean, if you look at, for example, something like let's do, for example, and I'm going to go through things so you can hear that they kind of sound the same. I'll change little things about them, but you'll hear that they sound very similar. For example, this is Chacarera from Argentina. This is, sort of West Africa or Central Africa, and then indigenous people from Argentina, and then Spain. And it's this is polka or chamamé, which is from the region of Paraguay and Argentina. So it's the Indians from Paraguay, which is called the Guaranis, the Spanish influence, and then also like West Central Africa. This is bambuco from Colombia. So same thing. Indigenous people from Colombia, West Central African people, and then Spanish people. And this is bambuco from where I come from, which is Venezuelan natives, Central West African people, and Spanish people. So, cueca from Chile and Bolivia and Argentina. And this is samba from Argentina. If I wasn't telling you that these are all different things coming from wildly different places, I mean, they all kind of blend together, don't they? They all kind of work. They're all kind of the same thing. Yes?
Is it just the accent, where you're accenting?
Basically, yeah. It's very subtle differences between one and the other, but really, like my thing, because I could spend 10 hours here going over so many things, because I love this, and I think that you like it. I see a lot of this. But my thesis that I wanted to bring is because my thesis all along, being an outsider looking at this music, has been that obviously there are the differences. Like these are all different genres. I can't just be like, oh, you play like this. Not really. Unless there's like 5 seconds left before the gig and you're a sub. But, ideally, yes, you will look at each genre independently because they have different stories, different contexts, different things you do. But the thesis that I've discovered is that, if I put one over the other, and you don't know, do you care? It sounds good. It's not like I said, if it sounds bad, obviously no. I wouldn't do it if it sounded bad. But it sounds fine. If I was playing, a chacarera, but it's like, no, but I kind of want to do this thing that they do in the bambuco in Colombia, and then I kind of go to this thing that they do in Chile. They all kind of work. Obviously, there are many more genres in all of these countries, but all these countries that I just mentioned are not rare. They are backbones of a lot of folkloric music that come from all these countries. And when you look at, and then other countries obviously have expressions that maybe trace closer to that kind of that we were before. Like you can hear that sort of element clearer, but it's still transformed and reinterpreted and everything. But just the 3 against 2, but what is that? It's the same 3 against 2. It's everything is coming from that same cell, that same thing. There's a sense that there's things happening that are like in 3. Who knows why 3? We get 3, I don't know, the Trinity, I don't know what it is. And then there's that sense of 2 always there, that gravity. And why is it always there? Because it's not music. It's just up, down. It's like how humans understand the passing of time. We understand it in binary terms. Because we always know when we're in another, when we go from one place to the other. And we always know what it feels like to come back. We never just kind of go, 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 go. It's always like, oh, we're here? Oh, now we're in the other place. And now we're back. And even if you look at each of these as, let's say, you know, the arrival point, like you're always arriving. You're always arriving. It's never like 1, 2. It's always 1, 1, 1, 1. We still all can feel what happens between one and the other one. That's binary. It's 0. Let's call it 0, you know, to use numerology. It's 0 and 1. It's not 1 and 2. There you go. And then in terms of 3, it's sort of the same thing, but it makes sense because of that. And then, you know, other styles, such as, for example, I was going to go into something maybe more, for example, in Cuban music, you know, 'cause you got to do the whole country by country thing, but, you know, South America especially, Venezuela, Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, Peru, Paraguay, Uruguay, this element of the 3-ness and the 3 against 2 polyrhythm that we were talking about is very prevalent, and it's a very big deal about a lot of their music. When you look at something more Caribbean, the Caribbean had a lot more Spanish influence, perhaps of a lack of that indigenous part, because there were smaller countries too, a lot of them, there were a lot of islands. And so the elements kind of took place differently. If you look at a place like Cuba, like here's a really old Cuban rhythm that they used to dance in the ballrooms in the 30s and 40s and stuff. But it was older than that. It's so there's like a couple things going on here. If you just look at the second part, we're back to where we were before. And if even it's like a polka kind of thing, you know? It's like... So there's that there, and then what's the other thing? Oh, it's very similar to that, isn't it? It probably comes from there. But instead of being tung, chu chung, it's tung, chu chung. So there's less time between the tung and the chu chung. You know? It's like tung, chu chung, instead of tung, chu chung. And that makes sense, because if you want to get 2 chu chungs, you gotta move it closer, because otherwise you ran out of time before the second chu chung. You know? If you go tung, chu chung, oh, I ran out of time. So then you move it closer, and there you go, tum, chu-chung, chu-chung. Oh, there you go. But they probably went... That's kind of boring. It's all chu-chung, chu-chung. Why don't we put something else in it? Ah! So there's this sense of one part that does something, and another part that does something else. And the 2 parts combined, we like how that sounds. The 2 parts combined, the A and the B, we can't get away from it. So now we have 2 distinct parts that are doing 2 distinct things, but they're happening at the same time. What is that? It's the A-B thing. It's the binary thing. And then what's this? Dun, dun, dun. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Isn't that 3? That's just like a really quick kind of cell of 3, because there's 2 things and there's a silence. But we understand where that silence goes. If I put it somewhere else, you'd be like, what are you doing? So even in something as complex as that, you know, if we look at it as something other than music, there's different parts moving and they're all the same and they're all doing different things and they come from different elements and oh my god, and there's chung chung and Tang Tango and what the hell is going on? No, it's all coming from that same cell of 2s and 3s and 2s and 3s at the same time. But, you know, there are many other styles that we could be going into, many more things. But I think that those two cells, especially when dealing with Latin American folk music, we can always listen to, we can always listen for, and kind of grab them, and they make, and that's why those musics work. They work because of these elements that are there, that have always been there, that don't really have anything to do with the music itself. The music is wonderful, the music is super complicated, and you need to go into it to understand it. But they come from these ancient understandings of how we understand rhythm and how we perceive it. And this polyrhythm, 3 against 2, that we love to talk about so much, it's not that complicated at all, you know? And it's not this sort of scientific thing of like, well, yeah, someone was sitting in a lab and put 3 and 2 together and they thought it was pretty cool. And we all started doing that. No, that's not how it happened. We just have this understanding that this can work. I don't know why, but you know, it cycles perfectly. And if you ever meet a musician that does polyrhythms for fun, which are a very rare breed of people, because they're really hard to do, you know, they're usually drummers, but you know, they're used to it. But, you know, anything after this, like, of course, we can learn how to do them. We can get good at them. We can understand them very naturally. But you don't find a lot of folk music that will have more complicated polyrhythms than that, happening so effortlessly and so continuously. Like, there are musics with very complicated rhythms, especially when you look at, you know, if anyone has ever checked out any Balkan music, or Turkish music, or Arabic music, I mean, they have a whole thing going on. They got a whole thing going on, and they cycle, but but you know, you'd think that, oh, they're so, you know, they're so far advanced because they can count to 11 effortlessly. You know, like while playing and while dancing, it's really hard. But they actually think about it, you know, if you think of something like this is a very, you can count that in 5 really quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. And someone might tell you, oh yeah, that's a 5. You need to count to 5 that fast. That's how that music works. You're like, okay, I'm gonna count to 5, I'm gonna try really hard. But if they don't tell you that, if they do you the favor of not telling you that, and they just say, just like figure it out. Well, I mean, it's just like a short thing and a long thing. Well, it's a short thing and a long thing, and there are 2 of them. We're back to the binary thing. It's kind of, you know that the long thing comes first and the short thing comes after, and there you go. And if you wanted to count them, then maybe they're bigger. The longer thing is like, you know, 3 is bigger than 2, so maybe long is 3 and short is 2. But that's a whole, that's a whole other field of music right there, and whole other genres. But they can still be perceived in this sense of, it's not really about this music theory that, you know, we love to study. But, you know, sometimes you don't need to start there. You can just start in this sense of like binary, tertiary, long, short, etc., etc. And in terms of Latin American music, you don't have to worry about that because we don't have rhythms like that. We like our stuff very straightforward. But we do have, you know, things happening at the same time that can get very complicated. But at the root of it, if you listen to the 3s and the 2s, if you understand that it's just things about time that have nothing to do with music, they just have a sense of gravity, and they have a sense of how we can understand sequences and things that are constant. And that's how you can get away with, you know, very rhythmically dense things that people will be like, you're a genius. You're just putting 3s and 2s together. And that's basically it. and charging money for it, which is, yeah, that's what you gotta do. Yeah, I don't want to keep anyone more than they can. I was thinking of maybe closing with a tune. I'm feeling some ice, so I'm gonna start wrapping it up. But yeah, I can definitely make this thing die. So. But yeah, I was just gonna explorations of this same thing that we've been talking about, and I don't know, see how many different kind of rhythms you can pick out. But I'm basically gonna be playing some either chacarera or bambuco thing from Venezuela and Argentina, which is what I really love to do, and what we're gonna be doing in a concert next week here with a lovely trio that I've put together with some friends and colleagues. And yeah, hope you enjoy this, and thank you so much for coming. We'll see what happens. All right. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm gonna be hanging out. I'm not just gonna run away. Not yet. Feel free to ask me any questions because I know I talk a lot and you're very nice and you didn't stop me, but I'm sure I said some things that I was like, what did he just say? Yeah, and thank you so much to Concord Community Music School. Yes, that's it. Concord Community Music School for having me. And yeah, we're gonna be back next week for that concert. So if you can come by, I think it's gonna be great. I'm way better when I don't talk as much and I just play. Yeah, thank you all so much. All right.